get uncomfortable, or maybe get comfortable with being uncomfortable, and fucking find some try hard. Like it's in
Yeah.
there, and it tends to be in those uncomfortable places. And the willingness to go into those uncomfortable places is where you'll be a completely different person when you exit.
Jeremy Meigs, Joel Ruscher, welcome to the Testpiece podcast. So psyched to have you guys here today.
Yeah, glad to be here. Good
Yeah,
to see
right
you
on.
again
Thank
too.
you.
So you guys, Jeremy and Joel, you've been a consistent presence on the West Coast bouldering scene for 3 decades now. You guys both appeared in the cult classic bouldering flick West Coast Pimps. That came out in 2000 on VHS. I'm not even sure people listening know what VHS is, but that's how it came out. And actually, I would say that the movie kind of revolved around you, Jeremy, getting the second ascent of Eco Terrorist and Castle Rock, which at the time, probably one of the hardest boulders in the area, and was first put up by that up and coming teenager, Chris Sharma. Uh,
That's right.
and yeah. So, but in addition to that fame, you guys were just a huge influence on my climbing when I met you in the early 2000s, maybe 2005 or something like that. You two were the strongmen in Plant Grant, Sunnyvale, and you had this modern, burly, try hard style that I don't know, as a college guy, I just thought was really, really cool. And yeah, just really excited to have you guys here today to talk about what you've seen over the last 30 years in climbing and bouldering, because the truth is it's changed a lot over that period. So welcome, you guys. Welcome.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All
Yeah,
right.
those early years were fun. Well, they're all fun, but those ones are definitely some new things that were happening out there.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's my little 2 second intro to try to cover 3 decades. But it's impossible. But uh, I figured that the way to handle it was just to start seriously at the beginning, because it just cracked me up when this came up, and that's to go way, way back. Jeremy, you mentioned that you actually went climbing for the first time back in like 83 or 84.
Yeah, it's like
It just
80,
blew
80.
my mind.
Yeah, 84, 85. I'll send you a couple old shots, but I have some shots climbing at Castle Rock in a Swami belt. Is an old boyfriend of my mom's, and went a few times, and then didn't start until like 93 on my own, high school.
Jeremy, what's a
But
Swami belt? I know what a Swami belt is, but
yeah,
do people, what's a freaking Swami belt?
yeah, it's just you just wrap webbing around your waist, and then you tie the rope through the webbing. So you fall it's going to hurt a little bit. Not when you're
Yeah.
like 9 years old, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not, I don't think a lot of people have seen Swami belts. They were, I mean, I started in like the mid 90s, early 90s, and I had kind of heard of Swami belts. They were like a joke, but it's literally just like if you took the quick draw webbing, I mean, it's just webbing, and then you just wrap it around
Yep.
you. And I mean, I assume they had like ATC or probably a figure eight
Figure eight.
to help belay. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or hip
Not
belay.
the knot. Yeah. Ooh. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. So how'd that? So Castle Rock is that amazing place in the Santa Cruz Mountains, Bay Area spot. But yeah, how'd that? You said you didn't start then really climbing until the early '90s, and yeah, where was that at?
Yeah. So 93, I started climbing in high school with my buddies. We were just going up to Castle Rock. And then we just basically climbed everything we could up there, but we kind of shied away from any double digits, which was 510. So we did like all 5.9s and that stuff because we just heard everything was too hard or was too difficult for us. So we never did that. And then soon after that, I started working at the climbing gym, and that
Was this with ropes
ropes.
or like? Oh, okay, okay.
There was bouldering there, and like Barry Bates was out there and like some other guys, right? But the bouldering wasn't what we were doing. We were pretty much climbing on ropes. So Summit Rock and Castle Rock and Goat Rock and down at the Underworld and all those areas.
Yeah,
So
Barry Bates. That I recognize. Batesarette. That definitely rings bell. That's classic as can be. So what was? So where did the gym open up? I know it's the Planet Granite, and yeah, what was that gym like? Like when did it even open?
yeah, it opened. I want to say opened November '93 or March '93, somewhere in '93. I think it opened, and I started working there '94. Um, Sounds about right. And then I think that's where I ended up meeting Joel a year or two later.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, how'd you get started, Joel?
At first I thought the shoes looked super cool, and I thought they were going to be really comfortable and like, like soft, supple shoes that I could just run around with and jump on things.
Be a ninja.
Before parkour was a thing, yeah, like ninja shoes or something. And I remember going into an REI and I put them on, and I was like, they were Anasazi Velcros. They were the tan versions.
Oh, dude.
Yes. I didn't know what they were at the time, and I put them on, and I was like, fuck this. Like, these things are horrible. Why would people wear these things? And I remember just going away being like, no, this is ridiculous. I'm never going to put that on. And then it wasn't until, I don't know, probably 6 or 8 months later, I had graduated high school. I didn't start climbing until I was 18. So I had already graduated high school. And some friends I had made outside of my high school friends, they had been climbing at Planet Granite. They were like, hey, you should check this out. And I was like, why? The shoes suck. Why would you do that? And finally they convinced me to go. And I was like, oh, this is great. And up until then, my brother was like I don't know, I hate to call him a meathead, but we were really in like the gym, just like physically working out, doing like, lifting type stuff from early years, since I was like 14 or 15. So I was already like way bigger, I'd be on the bigger end for climbers. And when I found climbing, it was like, I didn't have to worry about trying to catch up to my brother or try to keep being as strong as everyone else in the gym, or, oh, my body was shaped like this instead of like this, and you better work out like this so you can balance all. It was like, I could throw all that stuff out the window. It was like, oh, this is magical. Like, it fits my body style. It makes me feel good. I want to just keep doing it all the time. Like, rest days weren't a thing. It was just like constantly going in. And I think 3 weeks after I had started climbing, or maybe it was 3 months. Anyways, I think it was 3 weeks. I was a volunteer for like the belated kids at the gym. And 3 months later, I had a job there. And that's like really when I met Jeremy and started kind of hanging out in the gym.
Yeah. I remember the first day you were in there. Yeah. The first day I remember you coming in with Hector.
Yeah.
I remember you climbing on the pin, the isolated pillar that was in the gym.
Yeah. Probably just falling all over everything, but trying hard. So
I think that story of coming out of weightlifting and then finding a sport that, I don't know, worked for you is actually part of the crazy growth we saw in climbing. Like, when I grew up in a football wrestling town, and I mean, I'm just not that big a dude. And they were like, if I was, like a fast runner, they're like, Josh, like, should be a wide receiver. I was like, I'm going to get wrecked, you guys. Like, you guys bench 315. And then like that whole, seeing the Bay Area blow up in climbing. And I really think a lot of it were people who just were like, wow, I sucked at basketball. I didn't play hockey, but here's the sport and I actually feel good doing it. Maybe I could be great at it. And they didn't think of themselves as athletes. So I think that's a not dissimilar approach to defining climbing.
And
it's awesome.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say real quick, that was back Rocknasium days for you.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
Because I met you, I really firmly believe we met in late 90s or mid 90s. You and Morgan, Mopane.
Oh my God.
Oh, yeah.
Holy shit. I heard that.
I remember you guys, I remember coming up to Rocknasium a few times and meeting you guys there. Well, kids.
Oh my God.
It was with Vic and Dustin and that whole crew. Dustin,
Yeah, some of the other West Coast pimps. That was me. That was 11-year-old me. That's a trip that you called out those names. And yeah, Dustin lived up in the Truckee area, really climbing a lot, Cave Rock. And his parents actually had one of the earlier gyms up there in South Lake. But that's a trip you came out to Rocknasium, and we had Tiva rubber on the floor. I mean, dude, those were some of the earliest gyms in America, I should say.
Yeah. So kind of connect all that stuff. So a good climbing mentor of Jeremy and I, a guy named Dave Geisberger, he went to college up there. So when he then was working down here in Sunnyvale with us, and we would like kind of travel around. There were some early competitions in the Bay and things like that. But on our way to Tahoe, he would take us up there and kind of show us around. And we would always end up staying, at that point in time, was his girlfriend and her fiance, not his wife, but we would stay in Davis. So that was like a kind of a stopping point on the way. We would drive up in the evenings and then camp or stay in town there, sleep in his van again or something, and then shoot up into Tahoe the next day. So it became like a pretty consistent place for us to go to also.
Yeah,
Rocknasian, that is.
that scene really had a lot of great climbers come out. Like that was Beth, Beth Rodden,
Yep.
Mike Wickwire, Vic Copeland, all really, really did some amazing things later. I think I missed that boat because I was about 5 years younger, and as they started graduating high school, going off to Bishop, as we can talk about later, and doing FAs there, I kind of was just hitting puberty and chasing girls instead. But that actually makes me wonder why I think of you guys as boulders. And when I was climbing back then at the Rocknasian, we bouldered a lot as kind of like for fun and to do as a bigger group. But we would go to Cave Rock, which is like up on Lake Tahoe. It's rope climbs. We would go to Smith Rock. We would go to Star Walls. And bouldering was just like it just wasn't really in my view of climbing. And so I'm wondering, maybe like actually, yeah, maybe Jeremy, like how did you end up doing more and more bouldering when I kind of, yeah, I'm surprised that that's the direction you took.
Yeah, I think that was probably the early days at Planet Granite is when I started because I definitely climbed all the ropes there and stuff too, but we just kind of gravitated towards it, and uh, they used to just spray in the bouldering area, and then all the members would come in and tape routes, and it was awesome. So we were learning from
Yeah.
the old guys, like Doug Shue and Steve Provonost and a bunch of people that had been climbing for years and years before us. And then Joel naturally kind of gravitated towards it too. So I think both of us just kind of latched onto it because we really seemed to enjoy it the
Hmm.
most, I guess. I guess that's what I'm trying to say, right?
Yeah, I think it also allowed like a bit, not a bit more. It was like short physical effort where, these bursts, like explosive bursts of energy were not necessarily frowned upon. At that point in time too, climbing was like, rope climbing anyway, was like, there was a style and a technique. And if you veered from that, it was like, poo-poo, you did not do your rose move so clean and fresh and smooth, Like, they're like, you guys' footwork sucks. We're like, yeah, I know footwork sucks, but we're getting to the top. And over here in the boulders, we can do 5 crappy footwork moves, and it's something that feels way harder than we're doing on the balls. So it was nice to have this crossover at that. I know I just took over Jeremy's question, but yeah, it was interesting that there was, both men and women that we were learning from, and most of that gravitated to the
Yeah.
walls. But then there was a smaller group that would stick around to the bouldering.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what it it's interesting to me too because when I made that statement in the intro about when I saw you guys climbing in Sunnyvale, so this is 10 years after that, you guys were a really powerful. There was a lot of pinching, slopers, thuggier climbing, and I just loved it. And you guys are bigger too. I mean, it's not like you guys are massive football players, as you're saying, but like you weren't the rail thin French sport climbers. And so it's kind of interesting to hear that trend even started with you guys at the beginning. And I think I always gravitated that towards that too, even though I was like a stick kid and still not huge. I like that burl, that try hard, that something
Mhm.
in bouldering about like really putting it out there for that small moment. So yeah, it's just surprising though that grabbed you guys early because it was not the norm. It really wasn't.
Mm-mm. And right around that time was when Hueco was blowing up too, right? So we had our buddy Steve Monsanto, one of our main climbing guys that we climb with. He had gone out there and brought like the V scale back to the climbing gym. So before that, it was just
Yeah.
right. Before it was just 511 or 11 plus or however you wanted to rate this. Or I don't even know if we did like the B scale at one point. I'm not even sure what we
There
did,
was a
but
few, yeah.
yeah. So and then Steve brought that back. I think that was 96.
Hmm.
And I remember he set this V6 on the whale's tail prow that we used to call it at Sunnyvale, and it was just awesome pinchy thing. And it just some of that opened our eyes, and Steve just telling us how amazing Waco was and how there was this crazy density of problems there, and it was just like open and free, and you could do whatever you wanted. And I think,
Something real quick, Jeremy. People, when we talk about Sunnyvale Gym, the Sunnyvale Gym, I think, Josh, that we all climbed at is the current one now that most people would know. That's on
Correct.
oh yeah,
whatever
yeah, yeah,
street that is, kind of by your house, Jeremy.
On
But what Jeremy's
Stewart.
referencing is the previous one. There was a gym that was by the old City Rock or City
Yeah,
Beach.
it was on Mead and Bowers.
Mead.
Yeah.
And the walls were like this. They were all like sculpted walls. So it's interesting that Jeremy's like pointing that stuff out because the tops were all rounded.
Yeah.
And there used to end some of the holds on like jugs, but I remember it to be like a tape at the jug or whatever the finish hold was. But then I remember around that time that Steve was coming back from Hueco and we were spending more time bouldering, really leaning into that. We would make the rounded top the actual finish of the boulder problems. So there would be like a whole, like the 1960s, 70s crew were in there and they're like, oh, you guys need to learn how to mantle. Let me show you how to mantle. So we get to the top and it was these big round palmy concrete pieces of crap and we're like, "Rah!" So there was like this whole probably almost decade or something, maybe 5, probably 7 to 10 years where all the problems we would finish had some hard ass mantle top out.
Always mantle. Yeah.
That's funny that I don't know if that came around the time of Hueco because I definitely don't think of Hueco as being the mantle place.
No,
but...
that was actually a thing. So we had been, before we did our trip to Hueco, which I think was the winter of 97, 98. It was the last year it was totally open. Joel and I we'd climb at Castle Rock and we'd pride ourselves on mantling, right? And no knee scums and getting up and doing it clean. And I remember distinctly that was my one disappointment with Hueco. It was like every top out was trivial.
Yeah. Dude, no, it was, remember also around that same time, but remember there was a good European crew. It was, Kilco was there. Thierry was there. They were all people that came from Font area, Switzerland area. Mirko's dad, by the way, is Kilco.
Yep.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So we were climbing with his dad and his mom.
Awesome.
We remember,
before they were born.
When they all got born, like little babies. Yeah.
Yeah. They little kids were in the gym. They kind of like really kind of taught us like how to bring our kids out to the crag and how to bring the kids into the gym. Anyway, my point is that whole like Hueco area when we were starting to like open our minds a bit more about what's possible. And a lot of them were coming from Font style. Miklos and those guys were like, no, this is what you did in Font. We're like, oh, that's what you do in Font is mantle? You mantle in the valley too. Okay, we should start practicing that stuff. Learn from those guys. And then, holy crap, look at what we can do with these big overhanging, cool big moves that are like from Hueco style. It was a good time. Anyway.
Yeah, that whole thing where Steve came back and set, pinchy V6. I'm just curious how the fact that it stood out in your mind so much, Jeremy, where you were like, I remember this one. Like, was it like one of the hardest things that got set there? Was it a different style? Like, what did Steve bring back? Bring back the V scale is a huge freaking thing in itself, but yeah, like what stood out in your head when you set that thing so much?
I think it was super flowy and it was really good and it was fun to climb on. I think it was probably one of the harder ones at the gym. We were probably setting like V5s or something like that. It was probably generally the hardest routes.
Maybe, and they were all geared toward like big drop knees and maybe smaller holds, but like very technique based things, like very important fundamentals, but they were like the 512 and under fundamentals. And Steve's initial bringing something back like that hard was enter this realm of like, I would just describe it as a new technique. And the new technique was squeezing hard, but it was like squeezing hard and moving between things. So you couldn't just like squeeze a hold and just stay there. You're like, no, you had to squeeze something and then, and then move through it and move beyond it and keep your body stuck to the wall in different ways than we had learned before.
Yeah, like compression and keeping your core tight and everything. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like pushing down on holds so you can bring your foot up to like hand foot match. Dude, I remember he taught us how to bicycle.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that?
Yeah.
We were like, what the hell is this? What are you doing in there? That makes no sense. It's like squeezing, push on one, pull on the other. And we're like, what is this technique? What are you teaching us?
So Steve, just randomly, we had talked about Steve when we were last chatting, but I didn't quite connect it together who Steve was. Like I had climbed with him when in the Sunnyvale gym, the newer Sunnyvale gym. And I got, Steve will probably listen to this and it'll be terrible, but I was just a college kid. I was like, oh, Steve is kind of like the old man crusher. Cause he was strong, man.
Yep.
Yeah.
But he was older then. And then I was like, oh, he's the guy who made West Coast Pips. This is the Steve. And just, I remember him and kind of being like, wow, like I hope I am at his level forever. You know, like he was so good back then. But we can talk about Steve. I do before we dive into Hueco because it's so tempting. You guys told me the story of when kind of like when Jeremy helped you, Joel, kind of kick it up a notch, and that you were doing those drop knees and you didn't know how to squeeze strong, and just that kind of story really seemed to set the tone for, I don't know, I mean, how you guys boulder even today, and just I would love to hear you share that again.
Yeah, yeah. I kind of mentioned before that there's like phases of technique and strength. And I mentioned like, okay, there's like this kind of fundamental phase, which is like whatever, let's call it 5-0 to 5-12, where there's all these techniques that you have to learn in there. And then you kind of cap out if you're just being super efficient when you climb, or you're just kind of not trying to get super strong anymore. You're not trying to do any kind of like supplemental exercise or something. You kind of get stuck there. And that's where I was. I was stuck at like this V4 was like the hardest thing that I had done. And lots and lots of drop knees and back steps. And like I could succeed on climbs. And I was going, outside climbing, going to Bishop and going on through the gorge and Red Rocks and stuff like that. And it was like climbing, for that point in time was very well for me. But I remember hurting my knee. I did this crazy deep drop knee on that whale's tail. It's like whatever, 45, 50 degrees. And I just heard this horrible cracking sound and burning sensation. And I was like, oh no, my climbing is over. I'm going to, be depressed for the rest of my life. I couldn't lift my leg to go upstairs. Like it just hurt. Right? It wasn't horrible. Like I didn't need surgery or anything, but it was bad. And I was mentally just in a bad place. So I was like, what? I'm never going to be able to climb strong. And as I started coming back in again, starting to climb again, I remember climbing with Jeremy and Steve and those guys. And they were always like they were climbing B6s and 7s and stuff. At that point in time, I was like, oh, I'll never be that strong. I'll never be that strong. And I remember trying to do a drop knee and talking with Jeremy and Steve one day. And I was like, man, I just don't think I can climb these problems. It really, really hurts to drop me. I just can't do that stuff anymore. I think I hurt my knee too bad. And I remember Jeremy being like, well, if you really just want to climb harder, you should just climb harder. Just grab stuff harder. Just try harder. Instead of turning your foot and your hip all over, like just push harder, really hard with your toe there, and just grab that one and hold onto it really hard, and then move your foot. Just try harder, like squeeze. And I was like, well, no, that goes against the things that I know. No, that's not how climbing works. However, the proof was right there in front of me. Like that's what they were doing, and it was working. And I was like, wait a minute. I could just try harder and it would work. Oh shit. All right. And then it was like a huge switch in climbing for me. It was just like climbing, the difficulty just took off very quickly from there. And that's, I think, when I really started hanging out with Jeremy and Steve, and it was like, oh, you're going on that trip to Joshua Tree? Can I go? Oh, you're going there? Do you mind if I come? I'll drive my own car. Oh, you're going? And it was like, then we became a tight-knit group that was like traveling around together to all these different places. Yeah.
Jeremy, is that how you remember? You remember weak drop knee, Joel?
Pretty much.
Now I think of Joel as being burly and thuggy. It's still technical, but yeah. And yeah, do you remember that fateful day as well?
Yeah, I really do, because I think I remember the climb too, and it was this horrid drop knee with like foot above the knee, almost horizontal, just nasty. Yeah.
Well, I'm curious. I mean, I'm kind of curious, like where you picked that up, Jeremy. Like, or are you just the try hard master, or did that get handed down to you by some wise boulderer as well?
I mean, I think it was, initially probably, we chatted about this before. I think we got a lot from Greg Lowe, 100%. The timing is a little weird. I think I had already been climbing with him some, maybe at Berkeley, and had known him by the time that we are talking about this with Joel. But that truly came to fruition the next year when we were in Hueco and we saw what Greg was capable of.
Dude, can you get like, I'm just gonna put it out, like, who is Greg Lowe? Like, does it? People don't know who is Greg Lowe?
So, I mean, Greg is super strong boulderer, right? He famous at Berkeley, did tons of stuff early on. He's actually in that book that falls apart on the binding, Stone Crusade. So the history of American bouldering by Sherman. It's the awesome awesome just history of American bouldering. It's great, but every single book, the binding would fall apart. So it's just loose pages. But there's an old photo of maybe early 90s, maybe even late 80s of Greg in there. But he was definitely not the traditional rock climber that you would think of. He was big and burly. He weighed more than everyone else. He
But
was
not super tall. He's
not
like
super tall. Yeah,
5'8" or 5'9".
yeah. He's basically he's
Yeah,
my size plus 20 pounds.
yeah, maybe 180 or
Yeah,
185, maybe more than that then.
maybe.
But like, yeah, at his fittest was probably like 75 or 60, 165 pounds or something. But that was considered pretty
Big.
short and bulky
Yeah,
for hard climbing back then.
and he would of everyone else. I never saw him try 100%. It was always like 115 or more because we always had this super try hard.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
we
it was like
definitely yeah.
it was like a different approach. His approach was, I mean, he still had technical skills. He had still been climbing super hard. But like he would get down and like gritty. And when it mattered, it was like there was this like guttural, internal power that was coming out. And it was like I kind of described it before. It's like football players. Like there was like this real physical exertion that was happening, and I was like, "Ooh, I like that. That fits my style, and that reminds me of trying super hard in the gym. Not the, I mean, in like the workout gym when you're like trying to PR some crazy thing, which we didn't call PR back then, but you're trying to really try hard. You have to kind of go somewhere else than you normally are, in normal everyday life. And he could go there a lot.
All the time.
Made that
was,
okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so physical. And then he brought that on both sides too. Right? Like he would spot the same way. He was super physical, and we definitely learned spotting from him. So like you would oftentimes there's this theme where you try really hard, and then you gotta sit, you gotta rest, you gotta prep and get ready to do the next try. And he would be up spotting everyone. It's like,
Yeah.
I am resting. This is a rest.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And saving people's lives.
remember some of the stuff he would say later. It was a little bit later on, but like I'll never forget. It was like when he wanted you to try hard, and this is so. Remember, he was also a mentor to Chris Sharma too. So this is not like this. There's a through line in his influence on lots of different climbers. But he would say things to me before, and I heard him say it to other people. He would be like, "Oh, you're gonna do it right now? Show me. Show me that you're gonna do it." And you were like, "Oh, fuck. I'm gonna try hard." And he's like, it's almost like, "Get up there and entertain me. Go." It's like, "This is a show. Show me how to do it." Yeah, you're gonna do it. Prove it. And I was like, "Damn, that's like you have a different approach to climbing when you're like you think you can do it, but now you have to prove it to yourself, and not only yourself, you're like proving it to this larger piece of energy that's trying to ascend this boulder problem or something."
Yeah, that really sticks out in my head as being something so different from the world I was in at that time around sport climbing, where you would watch the best French sport climbers, and when they would fall, it wasn't clear like how they fell or why. They would exhibit this perfect drop knee, and all of a sudden they would let go, and you would ask them like, "Why'd you fall?" "Oh, I was pumped." Like it was. I'm not saying they were doing something wrong, but just there was this kind of almost like dance up the wall that would just end versus this deep try hard. And I do know Greg. He probably wouldn't even remember me because I was like 10 years old. And I would meet him at Mortar when I go there with Vic, and I just remember the guy's arms and just being a big dude. And me and Vic are like little skinny like teenagers, and that whole spotting thing is really interesting. I guess you call it a lost art where there wasn't really pads like and I think the thing that you guys were always known as being incredible spotters, but I think what you taught me, both of you guys taught me in the spotting mentality, was that you were part of that send. Like you had to be just as committed to that moment as the climber, and having that trust. I think it's what also builds up really close connections with people, is that that they're there to make sure that you don't, or that they'll do everything that they can to make sure you don't break your leg when you pitched off the top. And that was a meaningful lesson to hear.
Yeah,
Yep.
I think it's a pretty special connection if you can. There's something also that opens up there mentally for the climber. I'll get into both of those, but like that special connection is you can get up on the wall as a climber and kind of let that out of your mind. You can like you don't have to worry about falling. It's kind of like belaying. Like when you're like, okay, you for sure going to make sure I don't hit the floor. Yes, awesome. I'm going to go try hard now. This was kind of similar to that, and that you're like, dang, but you might actually have to lift 160 of my pounds and put me somewhere else that my body doesn't want to go as it's flinging off the wall. And that group that we had was like, yeah, we're going to get in there like those football players, and we're going to get a bloody lip, or I'm going to get hit in the head with your elbow, or we're going to squish my hand on the floor when we both fall down together, because that's what it's going to take for you to find something in yourself as a climber to ascend. Like you have to learn these things about yourself and how to get there. If that's yelling and screaming or being super quiet or whatever, like whatever it takes for you to get into some new zone, to find something new about yourself. It was my job as a spotter to help you get there. And because it was going to be reciprocated, whatever, 20 feet down the boulder
Yep.
later when you're going to try something else.
It'd be cool if we could just count the number of because we've never had serious ones, but injuries from spotting.
Oh yeah, a couple. Oh yeah,
Kick in the face.
couple. Yeah.
Yeah. Gut punch,
Damn.
whatever.
Yeah.
That's actually really, I don't know. I like how you put that, Joel. I don't know. I didn't even know it'd take it that deep. That was beautiful though. And but it does make sense because I definitely would look to my friends that I trusted before I would really go for something, like really go for it and say like, you got me. Like, do you have me? And I actually, what's funny is that maybe because when I started bouldering harder was in the next era, what I almost didn't want is a bunch of spotters, because what I would see is there's four guys and the person falls and everyone's just watching them. And
Yeah.
what I wanted is that one guy who I really trusted to stand in and not, to really be there with me, instead
Yeah.
just everyone watching you fall and hit the deck.
I
Oh,
think
you okay?
Good try.
Yeah, I think we would naturally do that. Like one of us generally we just naturally be like on point, let's say. And the
Mm-hmm.
other person is still there, whether, I mean, heck, sometimes a spotter spotting a spotter, right?
Absolutely. Especially when you
Like,
start getting to high stuff with like
yeah,
tiered landings and stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
So I got asked just because it kind of got mentioned offhand. Greg climbed a bit with Sharma with Chris Sharma. I'm sure people know who that guy is, and I'm just kind of curious. Like, I think of Chris as actually my defining thing about Chris is that he really tries hard. Like when I think of Chris, he believes he's 115%, and we could pick on like how he became that way, and being part of that scene probably was part of it. But I'm also curious just what you guys thought of young Chris. Like, was his style different? Were you just like, how is this guy doing these problems? Like, who was young Chris?
You gotta go, Jared?
Big question. Yeah,
Sure.
go ahead. That's a big question. Sure.
I mean, yeah, certainly, I think one his main mentors was Greg. I'm sure Greg helped with that, but he had to have some of that mental capacity just himself and just really enjoyed it and wanted to try hard. And yeah, I remember climbing with him at Castle and then watching his early trajectory, and he was just beastly strong. Like, yeah, I mean, we had climbed. I mean, certainly there were people way stronger than us, but he was really one of the first people where I was like, I don't know if I could ever do that move.
Yeah.
That he just,
I remember
I'm
seeing.
not sure if I could do that. Yeah.
Yeah, remember some of those early competitions where like he and Ethan would show up at the Planet Granites, and they were 12 and 13 or 13 and 14 or something like that. And there was like a marked difference in their ability, but Ethan was always really, really good. And then you would see like the best guys in our gym and the best people in our gym. And you'd be like, damn, that whatever 12-year-old Ethan, that kid is fucking strong. And then Chris was a couple years older than him. And you'd be like, oh my, there's like this whole other place that you could go. And then he'd be like jumping around and his feet would be kicking the walls and shit. His shoes were like, I don't know if they were the wrong size then. And it was just, it almost seemed like this controlled feebleness, but it also kind of fed into that like, oh shit, if you just really try hard, you could get to the top of a lot of stuff. So that was pretty nice to
Yeah.
see too.
It's cool seeing also, it's happened with a bunch of people we know, but it's like, you see these young kids, Josh one too, but like super strong, but skinny. And then you just watch, and then one day you're like, whoa, you're man.
Something changed.
Something changed, right?
I
Yeah.
I do sometimes tell that to kids who I'll talk to kids who are I say kids, like 18 or something, and they are starting to get really big and muscular. But I do feel like you actually start getting some of that pinch and sloper strength even later. Like I
Oh,
don't know
yeah.
why that
Hmm.
would be, even though 18. I'm not saying they don't look like full grown men, but it is interesting how it just continues to progress, and that specific thing actually seems to come along a touch later, like a
Yeah,
touch
like
I
later.
think so.
25 or
Yeah.
something. Yeah.
Look at your counterpart, Timmy,
Yeah.
right? He was a
Well,
rail, and then all of a sudden muscles showed up.
now
Yeah.
he's just doing one arm pull ups like they're nothing. We'll have to get you guys back on to share more with Tim too, because it was really influential seeing you guys for Tim, and these little things that you pass along around, like that try hard. I think I shared with you that Jeremy, you just said to me one time, "Hey Josh, why don't you just try to keep your feet on?" And it was like on overhanging stuff, and it's like it really changed my climbing. It really changed my climbing career. And actually, I pride myself. I actually think I keep my feet on steep stuff better than most. But there's no like secret there other than really trying to keep my feet on
Yeah.
for a decade. And that's really influential hearing that stuff from you guys. I know that happened with Tim too. So, uh, okay, I just because Chris was always, someone that I looked up to, because I remember, so Ethan and me are the same age, and Ethan kind of started really hitting his stride right as I was actually kind of leaving climbing, because Vic and Dustin, all those guys were leaving, and I just lost my whole crew. And so Chris was probably 16, and yeah, his strength just blew my mind, and what he started to do, and I was wondering, you talked about like certain moves that you saw, but what were there any sends or moments of an inflection point where it was clear that he was in another category? Like, I mean, that whole eco terrorist, like, I don't know how hard that was for him, but I know it was hard for you, Jeremy, but he put that up,
Yeah.
like, what, I don't even know how old he was, but he was not old.
I'm going to say 96 he put that up, maybe. Does that sound right?
Wow.
97?
Wow.
I did it 98, I think.
He was probably like 14 or
Yeah.
something. It was around that Ubermensch time
Mm.
when things really started standing out.
Yeah. I mean,
Uh,
for what I know, that was an old time project too, from like John Jablonski, Yabo, I
yeah,
believe.
bro.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah, it was I'm gonna set you up, Jeremy, because I spotted for Jeremy that whole time that he was out there, and I remember there was a magazine. I don't know if it was Climbing and Rock and Ice or something. There was a magazine article that came out and had a picture of, I don't know, I think it was Chris on it, and it was like, hardest bully problem around. I don't know
yeah.
what it said, but all of us were like in awe. Like, first off, someone you know or someone you've seen in your local gym is in a magazine. Holy shit! Look at all these other famous people that they climb with. Um, and we were now we're going back in time. We were trying to learn how to try hard. I mean, we were trying, but this was like some new level. Like, this was whatever they gave it then. I think they gave it V12 when it first came out, something like that. It was
Yeah.
like, holy shit, this is this whole new era. And I remember Jeremy just being like, I'm gonna do that, because he had done so much other stuff at Castle Rock, and so many of the other old timers had taught us all these things along the way. It was one of the last few things that was down there. And he was just like, I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna do it. And there was so much of the crew that was behind him. But now I'm gonna say you have to go ahead with your the challenges of trying to get it done.
Yeah. And I don't know how long that took. Like, what, 6 months or something? It was ridiculous.
Maybe longer.
Yeah, maybe longer. Yeah, and I remember even asking Chris about it, climbing out in Bishop one time with him. I'm like, hey, do you remember how you did this or what you did this? How you went this move? Like heel hook? Did you go straight on? Did you go up? Dude, it was just probably just more of like a mental lapse that it took so long, because I was, pretty quickly we were pretty close to the end. We're just on the final last move. Um, One thing that well, all of us, I guess, didn't have enough vision though to actually clean it better. Okay, so when we first did it, we only grabbed like these two little slopers in the middle, and there's that whole rail to the left that's like another foot or two to the left, and that got cleaned, and it's definitely
It's
easier
different.
that way.
It's
It's
different.
easier. It's better. It's also better.
Yeah.
It's easier and it's better. But we didn't actually use that, which was unfortunate.
It was like straight up. It was the two slopers in the middle, like right at
Yep.
the lip, and then the like softball, whatever,
The
grapefruit
snow
thing
cone
for the
thing,
right
yeah,
hand,
yes.
and then everybody just punched straight for the top. So it was only a few moves that were there.
I love this mental thing of pushing through and trying really hard. And that's to me what I always thought of as, well, I mean, this just typifies looking back in time and seeing guys like you all on the cutting edge, is this pushing through what was there before. Like, I think it's always underrated where it's not, it's not just about climbing V10 or whatever, like V10 hard. It's like, if there's only been V9s before, maybe you even are V11 strong, but doing the V10, pushing into the unknown, that to me like really encapsulates that try hard and finding that next gear that you didn't even know you had, even though maybe physically, again, you're capable of it. Like that's also why I've always admired Chris, is I feel like it's one thing to catch up to the strong people and be one of their peers. It's another to really lead the charge and be the guy who is the first one. And so, yeah, just wanted to, I don't know, shout out a little love to Chris, and
Yeah.
remember the 16-year-old Chris, you know?
And leading for decades too.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Still fucking doing it. God
Yeah.
damn, with 2 kids. Yeah. Bravo, Chris. Okay. Love that American style, thinking about the try hard and feet all over and the contrast, but you guys were there, and Steve brought back Hueco, and then you guys went to Hueco. You guys were like, oh, okay, like, let's go here. And I think you said it was your first trip to Hueco was the last year it was wide open.
100% open. Yeah.
Yeah. What was it like there? Like, what were people climbing on? Who was the crew there? Actually, like, how many people were even there?
It was a pretty decent crew.
Hundreds at Pete's, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Huh.
Pete's was like all free for all. You just camp out in the field out there. Some people were across the street. Some people were
$2 or something a night, or $1 a night.
Yeah.
Something cheap.
Yeah, it was like nothing. Yeah.
Yeah, we did it over New Year's. Had a huge bonfire, and I mean, I think we mentioned this before, but Joel and I were, we knew Greg, and Greg was there, and he was like, I mean, at that time right there, he was like top dog that was there, right? I think Fred Nicole and Chris or something had just left maybe the previous month. Is that right? Am I remembering it right?
I know Fred was there a lot. I don't remember Chris so much in those years. Maybe it was like a season or two after that they did the. I can't think of it now.
Okay.
Like the big one. Anyway.
Yeah, so it was cool for us. So we go out there in my stepdad's pickup truck, and we're sleeping in the back, and that's all we have. and Greg introduced us to this guy, John Wallace, and he was the only one there that had an RV, and it was the Angelus. And so Greg like introduced us to him, and we were all of a sudden in, and we felt like we were so cool because we got to go inside and like hang out and drink tequila and stuff. Every night,
yeah.
and it was fantastic.
It was so cold. It would freeze every night. It was like, Bishop dead winter, 7 degrees every night or 12 degrees every night.
Yeah.
And we were in this.
And
RV.
and we were sleeping in the back of our truck, and I sleep hot. I had one sleeping bag, and Joel would have 2 0-degree bags. He'd be tucked in them, and then I'd wake up in the middle of the night. He'd still be like rolled over on me for warmth. So funny. Yeah, but right, John Wallace was making the cordless crash pads out of that.
Oh, sick.
That
okay.
trip, right? That's when they first kind of showed up, and he was making them on demand.
We left here for the Bay, had no crash pad. We were like, we're going to Hueco.
Yeah.
We're going to Hueco.
You couldn't get them. Yeah.
We had to go to Steve Montesano had one, but he bought it in Hueco.
He bought it in Hueco,
before.
That's right. Yeah.
And he was like, you guys got to go. And I was like, I can't afford a pad. Oh, man, I got to afford gas and food. And Jeremy's like, I think I can pull it off. think it was
Cordless
like
pads were
120
like
bucks or something.
the premium.
Oh yeah.
Like they were like the one. If I remember, did they have like, was it like corduroy
It
covering
was
on
just
top?
yeah. It was a taco fold corduroy
Yeah.
covering on the top. Regular Cordura stuff on the bottom. Yeah, and if I remember right, I specifically remember Jason Keel was there, and he had this maybe Oldsmobile with a huge cow horn rack on the front, and I just remember John Wallace being like, "Hey, Jason, go to the storage warehouse or whatever. Go pick up supplies for 10 more pads. We just sold 10 more." And him coming back with all the supplies. Yeah.
And then they just build them right there. They build them either in the parking lot or inside the Angelus, in that RV or something for you right there.
So what were you guys getting on that year in Hueco? Like, what were the climbs that everyone was psyched on?
We both, that trip we got to climb on stuff that you never get to climb on anymore, right? So
like Mushroom Roof, or
Joel's that was Joel's crowning sin was Mushroom Roof.
Yeah, I had been climbing for a year and I had done Mushroom Roof, and I did it with like a nasty right finger too. And I was like, "There's no way I'm gonna stand, Jeremy. There's no way I'm gonna stand. I'm so worried. I'm gonna go home without doing it.
Try harder."
Yeah. Yelling and screaming at you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we did all this stuff on 45-degree wall. Like 45-degree double boiler. What? Man, a lot of those things that are now closed.
Yeah, was like
really fun.
And that stuff. I don't know if all that's up in the ceiling.
Yeah, that stuff's still open, right? Yeah.
I thought that
what else were people psyched
they
on?
didn't reopen Mushroom. I thought I heard something got reopened years ago. I don't know. I shouldn't.
It was not open last time I was there a few years ago.
Yeah.
Because I think they found artifacts underneath Mushroom Roof.
Okay.
Yeah. Remember? So when it was open, you could. This is what's crazy. Now looking back on it, I'm like, holy shit! How'd they let us do that? You could walk up and just check out all the petroglyphs everywhere, anywhere you wanted.
Yeah.
You could just wander around, slide down holes, and you're like, oh, look at this beautiful thing. People had fires and stuff in there. You could go everywhere.
Night. Yeah.
You're like, well, exactly. Yeah. Oh shit. You could go at night. You just take a car and pull over on the side of the road and just walk up into wherever.
And then we learned,
to go to.
Yeah, right. And then this is something I didn't say before. We learned from Steve Montesanto, like some really good tricks, right? So we're in Hueco. There's no showers there, right? Maybe there is in the park, but we're not in the park. We're at Pete's. So we were taught by Steve Montesanto. He's like, hey, bring one pair of nice clothes. It's like, so we would drive every other day to the Marriott Hotel in like a collared shirt, like dressed nice. In El Paso, and we'd walk in, just walk through, and then we'd walk right into the pool area. We'd shower, hang out in the pool all day. It was awesome, and we never had a problem until all the other dirtbag climbers caught wind of it, and they'd go in there all dirty with almost like dreads because their hair is so dirty, right? And they'd expect to get in, and then that place got popped.
Joel, actually, hearing that kind of reminds me of something that you mentioned around when climbing was smaller. There was this more like this verbal tradition of like, hey, like, let me tell you about something, but kind of keep it on the down low. And, it's something that kind of has seemed to have gotten lost where you could have those tricks but now it's a little different when, if you have 50 people all do it at once. And it's just, there was a different tradition back then. I guess any comments about how it's like now versus how it used to be?
Yeah. Then it was. There's still things like that now. It's just not as easy as it was, or it's a little bit more guarded. Like there's still places in the valley or places that technically have to pay for that you can get into for free, or you learn how to poach. Poaching's still possible, so like you can get to places where you're supposed to camp, but if you wait till a certain time, nobody's really checking if you paid or not. And it's like that, throughout the U.S. So things that like we learned or were taught to us from the previous generation are still valid today. But I think that the groups are traveling a little different. That's a big generalization, but like Airbnb is everywhere. So staying in a hotel was like a luxury. I remember one of the other old pieces of beta was to get like 8 of your buddies together. We used to do this with Vic and Dustin too. And in Bishop, we'd be like, oh, we're going to go stay at the Thunderbird tonight. All right, everybody chip in a few dollars. And then we'd be like, okay, only 3 people go in at first. And then once everybody's done, park on the street and we'll open the door over there. We'll let everybody. So there's like 9 people running in with all their shit so you can shower and sleep on the floor. And there'll be 12 people sleeping on the floor or something like that. But it's a little bit different now. I think people are, I won't say have a little bit more money, but there's less of the I'm going to do it by any means. And this is me seeing it. It may exist. I just don't see it anymore. But like I was going to climb and I was going to fucking climb hard at any cost. It didn't matter. It didn't matter how much money. It didn't matter if I had to walk. It didn't I was going to go. I was going to figure out how to get money and get there. And by any means. And now the means seem to be there in most of the climbing world, meaning like those the groups of friends will still get together and they'll get an Airbnb, but it's like a freaking mansion. And I'm like, damn, if I was warm, this is another thing. If I was warm and like comfortable and clean, I'm not sure I would have actually tried as hard. I'm not sure because now I told Jeremy this a while ago. I'm like, why are you guys sleeping in a van? Why are you sleeping in a truck? I was like, you become like a hardened individual when you're dirty and cold and like everything hurts when you go climbing. You're like, it ends up being a little bit easier to try hard because you're kind of just harder.
Dude, that video of Jason doing evolution, and we talked to him on the pod about, I think one of the things that really stuck out to me, like I went to Bishop, I saw that climb, I didn't have like a guidebook, and I go and I'm like freezing, and I go to the coffee shop like at sunup because finally I can go into town and get some warmth, and I look up the video of him, and for me what really did it was just like he's in front of that heater. You can just tell he's kind of fucking miserable. It's cold. I mean, dude, Bishop is cold and you're trying something and it's sharp and you're bloody. And, you know, I got to say, like, I know what you're talking about, but now I go and I stay at the hotel. Like, it's like, you're right. But like, now
exactly.
I'm just, you know, I'm in the Airbnb. I'm sleeping in the thing. And I'll never forget, you were talking about Hueco. I'll never forget I was there with Ethan and you know, I have like a puffy jacket from Costco, you know, just like, you know, a $40 puffy jacket. And I'm trying to sleep at night and I just can't sleep because I'm so cold. And after I got back from that trip, like I was like, I need to buy some good gear because like, this is not flying. Like I can't even sleep because I'm so cold. And good times, good memories. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, we had the hookup when we were in Bishop, right? Because we had a friend, Tom Costa, who had a house there. So he would let us crash there. So if it was really cold, we'd sleep on his floor or we'd sleep just outside in his yard, but we had a bathroom, we had a place to cook. And Joel was always way harder than I am. So I really appreciated, I'd drive up like Thursday night right after college, I had late labs, and I'd drive home like Monday night because I'd have to stack my classes Tuesday through Thursday. And I really appreciated having like a warm place that I could actually shower and climb, or I'm sorry, shower and sleep.
Yeah. I always said before, I think Joshua mentioned it before, but like being in a wonderful relationship with another human being is like not all, but like it's for the most part like all the best things. Like it's warm, it's comfortable, there's fuzzies inside, you want to just hang out. There's some activity there. You're like, oh, let's go for a hike. Or, oh, okay, let's go for a run if you're super active. But like that is the polar opposite of climbing super hard. In my opinion, because climbing super hard is cold, it hurts, things are bloody. You have to get out of this zone of like being in comfort and like really, really set yourself into all things that are like unusual, inconvenient, painful. You don't know the outcome. You have to like live there for a while. I found anyway, in order to send those hardest things. And it's part of that kind of through line going back to Greg, like what does it mean to try hard is to like be okay in that area of who you are when you're super uncomfortable, because that's when you learn that whole bunch about yourself. That's what trying hard ended up being for me. And being that kind of dirtbaggy guy in the cold, like you're paying your dues in your cold sleeping bag, I think it allowed me to get into that zone easier.
All right. I'm breaking up with my wife. I'm heading to the mountains. No, I know what you're saying, and it it shows me how no wonder I haven't been having as much success these last couple of years. It makes me wonder if, like, do you guys still think that that's what the climbing culture, like, I'll ask you, Joel, specific, like, do you still feel like that's what you're seeing in climbing culture today? Has it been ratcheted up? Like, are people digging deep like they had before? Like, because I mean, clearly people are climbing harder and harder, and just, what do you think about the current style?
Yeah, so it's actually interesting. I was just thinking about this a little bit yesterday, in that kind of style that I tended to go towards kind of capped most climbers out around the V12 or V13 range. And that was like the limit for a long time. Like that was, that was bad. I mean, there was
The
things that
limit
were
since
farther than
since
that.
like the 90s.
Yeah.
It's when I first went up.
But yeah, but there was like a point at which like just kind of raw brute grabbing could only get you so far. And so I'll set that aside for a second. I'll say absolutely the generations that have come after us are stronger than that, clearly, right? They're doing things that are way, way harder than that. What I've found is that they learned to use their entire body really, really well. They are so effective and efficient at like head to toe, their ability to heel hook and toe hook and do that strong multiple times over and over and over again is something that I still struggle with now. I'm like, dang, I can't heel hook that hard. I can't do that kind of motion. I can't do those things. Like I have to learn how to do something different. So that's one thing. That's so obviously I think that their entire being is used more effectively than we were. But if I go back to just raw, pure, fucking crazy try hard, I think that's what the top folks are doing now, where they're like really trying to find that within themselves to really, really push with that raw try hard in their entire being. Their entire soul from soup to nuts is just trying that fucking hard. And I think climbing is going even somewhere else now. So it's been like that 10 to 15 years of like rah grabbing. And now we got like this 10 or 15 years of like really effective use of our body, our entire body. And now if we can put those two together, that's what I'm hopeful for anyway, is to see climbing go even more than that. So really to sum up what you're asking is no, at least what I've been seeing, I don't see that raw try hard with, the full use of their body at the moment.
What about you, Jeremy? Does that ring true to you?
I mean, I totally get what you're saying, but I mean, some of the people, some of the stuff they're climbing is intense.
I'm not saying that the top of the top. That's what I'm saying. The top of the top are doing that.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah,
generally, if I go generally,
okay.
What do I see in climbing in a whole?
Yes.
Like I see, that whole level of climbing has like gone up, considerably. But I think it's the effectiveness of how they're using their body is gotten to that level. And just imagine if that same group is using the try hard, the whole thing is just going to.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost the same like when a little bit before our generation came in, and the evolution of shoes and new gear and new tech, right? Like, I was always one to, I mean, the old guys would be like, oh, what are you doing all these fancy shoes for? And I'd be like, why do you have a knee pad? What's a crack glove for? You don't need crack gloves. And now I'm like, I can't not wear something the wide boys wear. Right? So it's like, I think there's an evolution of technology with motion and learning, like you said, these intricate heel hooks and toe hooks and still
knee
combining, keeping the power.
Knee barring is
leveled up.
Yeah.
We used to be like, don't knee bar because you'll get stronger if you don't knee bar.
Yeah.
and to that point, Jeff, we were talking about it last time, is like, holy shit, no, like they're just fucking climbing super hard with knee bars. Like, I can't even get my knee in there. How are you knee barring that?
Right, and little snippets little snippets of like modern, newer, strong climbers come out. Like, when Adam was doing silence, and there was this story about him. He's like, I couldn't do the knee bar, so I went in and I had my trainer. All I did was train knee bars and calves, and I turned it from like a 1 second. I'm messing up the time pause to where I could actually get a rest. Right, you're like, that's leveling up different skills that are not just power.
I used to think knee bars were just binary, like either it was like a no hands and you just like, oh, it's a knee bar. Joel, what you said really resonated with me personally, because I'm like that V12, V13 climber. And what I pride myself on is knowing how to like really try hard. And some of the pursuit that I've gone through in the last 5 years, and it's even part of this podcast, is recognizing that that only got me to so far. And it's a balance though, because we also, we get questions, and I talk to people who are, still kind of in the beginning of their climbing career. And my advice often is still like, no, but just try really hard. It's like, what drill should I do? What should I do for this? And it's like, ooh, those are good. But I'd say the number one consistent thing I see is the really try hard.
Yeah.
But you're right though, that I feel like I hit a ceiling, and that embracing of all the stuff I didn't really want to do. Like I love just trying fucking hard, but that's not quite enough. And so,
Yep.
that really resonated with me.
Remember earlier where I was mentioning, like what Jeremy told me, it was like, it's time to level up. And it was like that 512, the 4-ish level. And I had to do something else in order to get to something harder. And that was kind of like that phase one. Like these are the fundamentals that everyone should learn. And then there's something that try hard got me to like that 13 range. And now I'm like, damn, if I want to do something different, I'm going to have to learn different. And I think that's where that crew really figured that like try hard wasn't good enough. These fundamentals weren't good enough. There's something else that needed to be learned. Some other things.
Yeah. God. Yeah. Let me know if you totally figure it out, because that's kind of one of the reasons I'm here. And it's interesting talking to those guys. I love focusing on like the good to great, because I often feel like I'm not saying that, climbing V13 is not really impressive, but that extra little bit, it always comes out in these interesting ways, where I often point to guys like you had like Chris and you had Dave Graham, and they are not the same climber, but they're doing similar things. And I every time I see this next level of climber, there's something that they're unlocking that is not as simple as, oh, you need to know how to drop knee. Like you should heel hook. Heel hooking is really good. It's like there's something that they're tapping into that seems to still be a little ineffable. I don't know if we have kind of grokked it as a community, like what's really going on at that V15, V16, that try hard, or not try hard, that just that level, what's really occurring there. So yeah, let me know if you guys figure it out, especially at our age group. If you guys all of a sudden start crushing V17, I would give me that pill, that dose of knowledge or pill. Okay, well, you guys talked a little bit about Bishop, which is a place I freaking love, and I think everyone loves. And I know you guys were some of the earliest developers that you were in. I mean, I know it probably got climbed on for many years before you were there, but this kind of more modern, harder grades. And after going to Hueco and getting your mind blown there with Greg and seeing the try hard and having guys like Fred Nicole come through, what was Bishop like in those early days, Jeremy? Like, was it? I guess one of my main questions is, after going to a place like Hueco, was it clear that Bishop was a world-class destination? Were you guys just like, oh shit, this is our backyard?
Yeah, I think what really did it was, you had the Milks and all that other stuff, and people had climbed like Dale's Camp and those other ones a little bit. They'd all this stuff had been bouldered on, but then when found all the tablelands, right, and you had Happies and Sads and all these other ones, and it was you had multiple different styles in one setting. So you can go climb granite. Heck, you can go up and climb more like higher alpine granite. You have all the tablelands like volcanic tuff and all that stuff. It was pretty evident, and the ease of access. So at that point, when Bishop started blowing up, Hueco access had already been a little bit more limited. So you had to sign up. It was limited access into the park each day. You had to have a guide. That might not, yeah. So Bishop was still this wide open, and it was pristine. There was no one out there. Like you see photos now to back then 20 plus years ago, there's like vegetation everywhere and no one in sight.
I gotta tell you, just so you know, if you go on like a Tuesday morning, it's surprising how often you can still get the Milks to yourself. Just a little hint there.
Nice.
If you go the Thanksgiving weekend, it's fucked, and there's like 150 cars there, and I just don't go. I just don't go. It's not, and I one thing that I always try to make a point, because I was an early climber, but there was a lot of climbers before me. Like, I don't want to hate all these people going and loving Bishop and enjoying it for what it is and dealing with the crowds. Like, it's just not for me at this point, but just a little secret. You can literally, if you can organize your life to show up on random Wednesday morning,
midweek,
surprisingly empty. Yeah.
Yeah. So those days it was totally open, and we're out there with Joel and Vic Copeland and Dustin and a whole
Tim
bunch
Steele.
of other crew. Tim Steele, yep.
Mm-hmm.
And we told this before, right? We were going out and just scouring for boulders, and then we go back to McRyan's house and like just give all the details and spew it because he was creating a guidebook. It's like, oh, we found this, or this. Like it was daily.
Yeah, he used to like feed us. He'd be like, okay, come back to my house for a curry, or come back to my house for pasta, or come back. So we would all just go put up a ton of stuff. It would be like I said, Jeremy, me, Vic, Tim. There was a good Berkeley crew that was there too, a handful of people, and we would just go run all over the place. And we're like, holy crap, I just did 15 new things. Or someone would spot you, and then we'd go back to Mix and we'd eat. He'd feed us some food, and then we would we'd point to him on a map where it was, and we'd draw. He'd bring out his little funny, fold out map, and we'd start circling new boulders and give it new names and grades. And it was just it was just months of feeding him new places, new problems, new names, It was just anything, and it could be any grade too. It was like, clearly there's a lot of easier stuff there. Just be like, oh, I'm going to do this. And then when you get to the top, you'd like walk back a little bit and you're like, holy shit, look at this corridor down here. Mm-hmm. And you're like, everybody come back here, it's a corridor. And you like scurry down into the corridor, and then out pops whatever, Rios crackers.
Rios are right. Yeah, that's what I was
what is this thing? Yeah, there's stuff like that like all over this game.
Was it obvious in the buttermilks that people were going to boulder these massive granite eggs that were seriously tall? Like, what did you like? I know some stuff got top roped on the Grandpa and Grandma Peabodys, but when you guys were looking at, I don't know, all of them are so freaking tall. Like, was it clear that there was going to, I don't know what your guys' pad situation was like, but I'm guessing you didn't have 50 pads. You guys had 3 pads or 2 pads or no pads. Was it clear that there was going to be lines on these freaking death-defying boulders? When did that start entering the purview?
That was probably like mid 2000s or early 2000s. I remember Vic, when they got stuck out there for a while. That was a tableland stuff. Sorry, let me go back to the buttermilks. But when they did, oh crap, I can't think of the name.
Like Los Locos, was that?
Los Locos.
Los Locos was sad boulders, yeah. Secrets of the Beehive, Victor did.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That stuff is all done, yeah.
And he was, both Joel and I have talked about this, he was just amazing on the ball-bearing gravel top-outs. Mm-hmm. Like, his feet were so delicate. And he was doing some high, bold stuff.
Yeah. He didn't do like two pads or something.
Yeah, not evolution and this type of stuff, but 30 feet
Secrets
up
on the Beehive is tall.
Slats. Yeah. Those are all, and I think those were done on rope early on. And then that was what was his name? Who was the British guy who taught us all about head pointing? He was one of Mick's friends, but then he lived in Bishop for a while.
Not Stu Redmond.
No, not Stu. Kevin Thaw.
Oh yes, yeah.
Kevin Thaw was out there, and I don't know if he was living there. In fact, I think he was living there for a while. But he kind of, him and at that point, oh crap, who was the other guidebook writer? I can't think of the name. Strong, lived in Bishop. Anyway, they were another British guy. I can't think of the name.
Yeah. He's in. Yeah. Matt Birch was one.
Matt Birch was there too. Yeah. But this was even earlier than that. It was like, hey, this is head pointing. And they'd have some folks come over from the UK, and they were like, "Oh yeah, this is what we do. It's called head pointing." Who's Lisa Rand's husband?
Wills.
I'm sorry, Wills, if you're listening to this. I apologize.
Legend.
Legend. But it was like that group was there also around that time, and kind of learning about the melding of those different styles was also around that time that Victor was learning. It was like, oh, this is head pointing. Oh, you throw a rope on it and you practice, and then you just ditch the rope. And now people are like, oh, no, that's how you clean it. That's how you do new first ascents that are 45 feet tall. And like, actually, a while ago, they did that shit and they cleaned it while they were going. And then they'd climb back down again and go up and they climb back down and go up and climb back down.
I'm glad you explain what head pointing is, because I feel like that's not even a word that is in the kind of current vernacular, because it's a style. It's a way of.
Yeah, it's a little different than that. It's kind of like a meld, meaning the head pointing would be like where you're putting in traditional gear along the way, but you practice it a bunch on pretty safe from the top, like basically top roping, and then you do it from the ground up while placing gear. So the problem, if you look it up, whoever's listening to this, like there's some pretty nasty falls that happen because they're like putting in these ridiculously small pieces of gear. But now it's a little different where you're kind of like top roping, looking from the top, but it's kind of like old school head pointing.
When did Hard Grit come out? When did that movie come out?
What a great movie.
That's the guy who came out.
2000 or something?
What's that guy's name? He was out, and it was like that whole time he came out to visit Kevin and Nick, and was like, let me tell you about that. Because Lisa started getting into going to the UK with Wills, and she was like, oh, I'm going to start doing a bunch of head pointing out there. So it's kind of like a shift in how we were thinking about bigger boulder problems. It was all that early time frame, early 2000s.
God, it's funny how Vic ended up doing some of that stuff. I knew Vic more like when he was like the 14, 15, and we did a lot of trips together. And I didn't necessarily see it coming that he would have a wild head to climb this stuff that was, maybe in today's terms, it's not like the craziest stuff, but I don't know, man.
It was
go do Secrets of the Beehive right now. Like I did it, not crazy long ago. You get up there, you sit on that hold, and you kind of look down. You're like, I am up there. Amazing climn, by by the way. Amazing climb.
Yeah.
And how many pads are typically on it now?
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah. Maybe I would do it now. I've been to the top a ton of times, and I've always down climbed. I've never done the top.
Dude, I was in Joshua Tree. Side tangent. I was in Joshua Tree. Vic and I were down there. We were climbing at that point in time for the North Face, and we were doing some stuff. And we started getting into some pretty stupidly high stuff out there. That was like V6, and we'd have like a pad or maybe two pads or something, and we'd get done. We were like, whoa, dude, that's bold. And it was awesome because there was another group in Bishop that would tell us how they would do that stuff in the 60s and the 70s. V6, they call it 511 or 512, no pads. And they'd be like, oh, we would deck from there for like 5 times before I did it. And you're like, dude, your feet are at like 18 or 20 feet, and hitting that just so people don't, or if you don't know, in Joshua Tree, it's like that decomposed granite that people put in their yards now, but kind of like concrete all over the ground. And just knowing that there was people with no pads being super bold up there. So that was also kind of thing that Vic was, we were entering into that zone.
Just to give the new age credit. So, I did some stuff that I do like high balls. And when I was highballing, I thought I was really badass doing some of them. But what I will say is that now with all these pads, you will walk up to Evolution at the end of the day and there will be 20 pads. But I feel like now people have some of that same mentality where, I don't know, man, if I was going to jump off 18 feet, I don't care if there was a bunch of pads. I'm not down to jump off at 18 feet, even if there were a sea of pads. And now you see guys like pushing it to that same, I would argue like that same level, but with pads. And now they're like, yeah, I'll go off at 25 feet or something. And you just, so they're doing it.
Exactly. Yeah. They're just pushing it up another 25, 30 feet. Yeah.
Ooh, that makes my hands swell. I'm curious, we're still on the West Coast. What did you guys think about the Valley? Like, how, did you end up in the Valley as much? Like Yosemite Valley, people may have heard of it, El Cap, but maybe amazing bouldering there. Yeah. How did, like Jeremy, how did that fit into your climbing career back then?
Yeah, we were definitely going out to the Valley and bouldering for sure. And there was, during that time, I'd say there's definitely a lot of new stuff going up, but there was still already hard ass stuff, right? Like Dominator went up in what, 96?
So incredible.
It's just
so incredible.
I think Fred Nicole put that. No. Jerry Moffat put it
Jerry
up.
Moffat, yeah.
Jerry Moffat put up 96.
I think it was a little later.
I thought it was, I could be wrong. I thought it was like 80s or something.
No.
I don't know.
Wasn't that long. Yeah, it was't that old. Anyway,
his book, by the way, is so good. If you haven't read his, well, he has multiple books, but it's, guys, the book where he describes his kind of autobiography and going
Okay.
through Dominator. Anyways, I'll link in the show.
Yeah. I would definitely want to read that.
So good.
Yeah, because he was in an old climbing film called On the Rocks. I wish I could find a copy of this. He's like 18-year-old Jerry Moffat, like doing pull-ups and all this other stuff. And I think that's the one, correct me if I'm wrong, Joel, where he talks about climbing in Tuolumne. He's like, the great thing about these is you can grab these knobs like this, or you can grab them like this.
What?
So what everyone calls a meat hook, we call it Jerry.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I've heard that
Yeah.
said. I didn't know
He-
that was the etymology. That's cool.
Yeah, he'd grab the end of the knobs like
You go
this
like
with
this.
his hand.
Yeah.
and
So
go,
anytime we grab something, we'd be like, Jerry, that thing. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, we were definitely climbing out at Yosemite. I know Joel has a similar story, but I remember climbing on midnight lightning, no pads, and I watched Masters of Stone, so I'm following the exact beta. Jump out to that big, the big jug before you float your feet up to mantle, and floated my feet up, and then hand popped and fell horizontal. And like you said before, 3 guys around me all dropped me straight. To be fair though, the rock wasn't really exposed, so there's been a lot of erosion. So the climb was at least a foot
crazy.
to 2 shorter. But I know Joel had a similar bad fall on midnight, or you did it with no pads, or
No, I was so horrified I sent it because I did not want to fall. So it was probably 97. So I've been climbing, I don't know, a couple years at that point in time. And I had made a trip with 2 friends of mine, one from high school and another friend of hers, and we drove up for the day specifically to do Midnight Light. I was like, I'm gonna do this. And we get there and it's like not ideal, middle of the day, and I don't even remember warming up so much, but I had one pad and it was like an older clapped out Metolius pad, it wasn't like the tiny ones. It was it'd be like a small pad that you can buy today or even smaller. And I remember the one friend of mine, her and I were in a photography class together. And so she was going to come out and shoot black and white photos, which I wish I could find. In fact, I should probably reach out. Who knows if she has that thing anymore. But I know there's a whole series of photos, black and white photos of me doing that climb. And my other friend, Ellen, whom at that point is not a spotter, I was like, hey, can you move this pad a little bit as I go and maybe try to keep it under me? And she's like, yeah, no problem. And I remember getting up there, doing the jump through the lightning bolt. It was like, and on the clang, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna mantle this thing, and just kind of glancing back, being like, oh, this could go really, really bad at this point in time. And I remember her kind of like standing there, but I don't think the pad was nearly in the right spot. It was like on top of the rock. It was a little bit of exposed rock at that point. And I'm like, oh shit. And I remember turning it over, getting over the foot, being like, oh man, this could be bad. And just being like, there literally is no way you're going to fall, and like becoming somebody else. You're just like, and you're like, your fingernails could like pop off of your hand and you would still keep climbing. You're fighting so hard to top it out. I remember topping it out. And I don't think I climbed anything else that trip. Like we drove there, we like got some food or something and then drove home.
Did that
like,
take done.
God, dude. It was horrifying.
Dude, that mantle is no joke. And when you have but there's something about mantling that is way scarier than other ways to fall. It doesn't always end up that badly, but it just feels really scary. And I gotta tell you, a lot of people I have a lot of friends who have broken their ankles in the modern day world around Midnight Lightning with all the pads that you could ever hope for, but probably still few responders just watching.
It's also the way you mantle that thing with the foot way out, it's easier to fall bad versus if you're just straight up turning a mantle over, like on a slopey top out. If that makes sense.
You know what's funny is I've only done Midnight Lightning once, and I flashed the mantle. I did not flash the thing. But what I found was really interesting about that mantle compared to other ones, and why I think it leads to that, is that I didn't mantle it like this kind of slow. I kind of swung into the position. Yeah, you kind of do it dynamically, and it wasn't so bad, but I got lucky. I like dead pointed to the right spot, and you're really into the wall, and then you just are right there. But if you swing and then kind of swing back down,
There's a lot of people, Josh, too, that they go to like jump into it and they pull so hard with their hands, they overpower it and they pull their foot off.
Yeah.
And their foot's like, whoop. So now you're like rocking over and you're now just like rotating around some center point of your hips and you're like, here I come, head first. Yeah.
All those holds are much slicker than they used to be.
Yeah.
You definitely had to be clear about that.
And I think the mantle is actually different. Oh, that's clearly different. If you start the mantle first, turn the wrist over, then put the foot up, or put the foot up and then try to mantle. It's like a whole different boulder problem. I think it's successful both ways. Some people like it both ways. I have a very particular way I like to do it, but one way feels way fucking scarier than the other.
Yeah, I think I always turn and then put a foot up, right?
I go foot first. I'm foot first. I'm curious.
That's the natural way to. It's the way it feels right, but that's not the way I like to do it.
I think it's because whenever I think of, I always like getting my feet up first. It's always like, I don't know. I'm curious, when Yosemite now always has this touch of, I don't know, sandbag, or people do not go to Yosemite because they get their ass kicked. People, you can go do V8. And then go and try Midnight Lightning, and you're like, oh, V8. I'll go and do King Cobra. Oh, V8. Okay. And I'm just wondering if it was like that back then. Like, Joel, did you feel like Yosemite was hard back then, or is this a stylistic difference that's evolved throughout the years?
So I think it's been hard forever. It's one of the places that, like, even when you're good, you can still get your ass handed to you there. Like the folks that are there now, when I was spending tons and tons of time there, that group that's there all the time are still on their toes. They're still like diligent about their technique because it can sneak up on you, which is one of the reasons I really, really like it. You kind of can't you relax. Sure, on the easier stuff, you can relax a little bit, but it always keeps you sharp. It was hard back then. I think Midnight Lightning originally was V7 when I'd done it. Yeah. I was like, oh, okay, sure, V7. And that was just what it was. The way we were kind of taught, like it's always been sandbag. And there was kind of two ways I could have approached it. Is like, oh yeah, you go there and you get sandbag, and you could not like it. Or you could use that as like a data point, like, okay, that's your mood board. You're like, this shit ain't really that great. It's just hard. You're just going to do something different. So what we did is a lot of the styles of the Bay Area gyms, for most of them, also tend to be a little bit sandbag. Like the Planet Granites and now Movements, they were for a long time sandbag. And a lot of the people that came out of those gyms were strong. And I think part of it was like a psychological challenge. Like, oh yeah, you're only doing V8 to V9 in the gym, but you go outside on your climbing trip twice a year and you crush V10 to 11. And it was like this offset where you used it as a tool to get freaking strong. And then when you went out there, you were like, whoa. But there was also like, you knew that what you were doing in the gym was sandbag. You knew that the valley was sandbag, and it was just something that you had accepted. And when you went to other places, that was probably more like a real grade. But the closer you got to Hueco, it was a little bit closer to like what real V grades were, right? And the further you got to Yosemite, it was just like it would start, leaning way off.
Yeah, I mean, we were climbing blue suede shoes at V4, Midnight at V7, Thriller at V9.
Oof.
Yeah.
God, those, even at the grades that I would say now, people would say blue suede shoes is V5, Midnight Lightning is V8, and Thriller is V10. Even at those grades, people are still like, I had one buddy do Thriller for his first V10. We were like, dude, you did a V11 for your first V10. Like, that was incredible. Like, good job.
Yeah.
Well, that makes me feel better because I still get my ass kicked in the valley, and that whole Bay Area crew that is in the valley to this day. I love watching them climb. It is beautiful, and the valley also has always been tall and proud, and a special place. And I got one more question about Dominator, because I was going to the valley quite a bit in probably like 2012 or 14, somewhere around there. And we were climbing pretty strong. We were going there a bunch. And I want to say that Dominator hadn't really been done since like Chris or something. It seemed like it had this, decade long stretch. And and then people started doing it. I remember, I think like Cuz or Brian had, like, people literally like took hoses to like wash the hole and thought, like, does this even go? Did something change? Because it was so mind blowing. I was just wondering if you knew of people even trying it, back in your era when you were going a lot.
It was, because I think we had like Jerry did it, Fred Nicole did it,
I think Chris did it.
Yeah, Chris
sure.
did it. Chris did it from the low start, I think. He was the first one to do low start.
That's
I distinctly remember climbing that with Greg Lowe. and I was on a trip there with Greg Lowe, and I was climbing with this guy, Alpine guy, Beat Commerlander. That's it. Him and I did the phone book.
Oh
Like
my
one of the
God.
first ascents of the phone bike. I don't know who put that up, but I remember specifically working on Dominator with Greg, and we got really, really close. And then for whatever reason, we did different trips, fonts and stuff like that, and we never really went back. And then, to my recollection, I'm sure people did it before, but I remember Wills did it.
Wills and Paul. Paul
And
did
they,
it from the. Go ahead.
okay, yeah, and they did
Paul
like this
Braza.
crazy new beta, right? Like that big weird heel hook
Heel hook.
beta. Yeah, so it was a totally like just different style, different climbing technique on it.
Yeah, dude, the heel hook bait I feel like is what basically everyone does now, and I'm not surprised that Will's. I wonder if he pioneered that. It just makes me think of his style. That guy knows how to statically lock off and crimp, like really pull in and go. That guy, I bet you this generation doesn't usually hear about Will's, but I mean, him and Lisa were just their ability on small holds and that static style is just mind blowing. So okay,
Still are.
Yeah,
Still.
yeah. Okay, you we we took care of some of the big areas in America, and let's rewind just for a moment to after that fateful trip or I don't know, fateful, that mind expanding trip in Hueco, some time in Bishop. And I remember you guys saying that you took a flight, you went to Font, and that was another big paradigm shift for your climbing. And just what did you see there, Joel, that like seemed different? Like why was Font different than Hueco?
Yeah. Sorry, give people a little bit of context of how we knew nothing about what we were doing. Jeremy and I booked our flights. We had talked about Fontainebleau with like Mirko, not Mirko, Hueco, and some of the Mirko's dad and some of the other
Nicholas, and he hooked us up with Le Ministrel, our very first
yeah.
trip there, which was
So
sick.
sorry, I got to go off on a tangent. So funny thing. Jeremy and I, we booked our tickets. It was like $300. We're like, oh, yeah, we're going to Font. We're going to Font. Where did we stay? I don't know. You just get there. There's a place called the Jeet. We were like, what's a Jeet?
Well, no, we didn't even
we,
know about
we
Jeets yet.
We
Yeah.
camped the first night at Kuye out in the fucking anyway.
Fields.
If you know, you know. It's a sketchy place to camp. So anyway, we booked our trip, and I was like, Jeremy, where do we go? Where do we stay? And then one of our friends who gave us the Ministrel's phone number, Mark's number, he was like, call this guy and he'll tell you. I was like, all right. So I went home and I was like, and I called, and it was like ringing. I'm like, I dial it again, ringing. Third time, ringing. Hello. He's like, bonjour. And I was like, hey, my name's Joel. I know a guy named Miklos here, and he told me to call you, and maybe we could climb. We're going to come out to Fontainebleau. And he was like, what? What? And he's like, basically said, oh, okay, nice to meet you. Can you call me back later? We're sleeping. I didn't even pay attention that there was a time difference. I didn't care. It literally wasn't even in my mind that there are people otherwhere in the world that actually would answer the phone that I call. And I remember having to tell my mom I was going to pay for the call. Anyway, so I was like, who's Mark Ministrel? Who's this guy? We're going to go meet over there and just go, I don't know, let me give him a call. Fucking wake him up in the middle of the morning. It was like 2 a.m. or something. Oops. Sorry, Mark, if you hear this. I've since said my apologies. But anyway, when we were here, like there was this try hard method, and it was very like what we didn't know at the time, but it was like a very, very American style of climbing. It's like you sit down low and you go to the top and you make noise as you climbed, and if your feet went to the right spot, okay, great. Your whole goal was to get to the top by any means necessary. Except your knees. Knees were frowned upon. That was like one of the only things you couldn't do. But when we went to Font, like we knew what we were doing at Castle Rock. We knew that Jeremy was doing, hard stuff. He had done eco-terrace at that point in time, and I couldn't do eco-terrace, but I was repeating lots and lots of other things. I was like, "Ooh, we're pretty good on sandstone. This is a place we should go." When we got there, it was first off, it was hard. It was hard to climb there, but in those first few sessions, it was like, "Yeah, we're strong. We're going to go there and do stuff." And immediately we couldn't really do a ton of stuff. Like we had to learn the style a bit more. There wasn't crash pads. People would have these little mats and they would just put it down to clean their feet and start climbing. Spotting was very different. There was a lot of like butt touching and hip grabbing and stuff. And we were like, why do they keep touching each other like that? what is that? Like, we didn't understand. Like, spotting was still kind of a thing here, and we were like, oh, you grab people, and they were like, well, why don't you grab people in the right spot? Like, that's important. Grabbing people at the hips or pushing them at the hips is more important than just grabbing them, like tackling them, football style we were doing. But when it really became apparent that there was a whole new world out there, and our perspective on climbing was going to change, was when we had seen families come out to the boulders, and they're like pushing strollers and having a baggie with like, bread and lunch and cured meats, and just talking with each other and eating little snacks and having a little picnic. And then the wife, mother of the child, put her climbing shoes on and fucking ruined V9. And we were like, oh shit, I can't touch the V4 or V5 to the left, or I'm having a real hard time. I'm afraid of spinning off. It's called the helicopter or something, to the left of
helicopter, yeah, left of Carnage and Berzina.
Those things to the left, and on the this, whatever the 5s or 6s to the right and stuff. I'm like, God, these are hard. We got a pad and all the nice gear, and she was just crushing, and we were like, oh, not only have we not seen women climbers like this in the States, but she was fucking ruining what we thought we were even capable of. And it was like, holy shit, like, we should really pay attention to what's going on here. This is definitely a different approach to hard climbing.
Yeah. And she was kind of warming up, as I remember. She kind of went like L'Abattoir, Carnage, Berzina, just
Just like, working her way through it, having a conversation, like grandpa, older people around.
She had 4 generations there, right?
It was like,
her grandpa was there, and he was bouldering without a pad at like 80 years old.
It was like a whole different perspective about like how the family unit went out and enjoyed a weekend or an afternoon or something. They're like, maybe you guys are onto something here. Hey, what is this all about?
How long were you guys out there? Did you start, adjusting to the style? Like, that sounded like day one, by day 30, were you, warming up on V9 also, or how'd that evolve?
No, Jeremy was always better for those years.
Back then was.
Shots fired. No, he's always been real good on big open hands, slopey, the duckbill pinches and shit. So he was always schooling me on how to.
What was the highlight of that trip, Jeremy?
Oh man, we did a bunch of like those weird link ups, right? Like the Carnage, Berzina link ups, sit starts. We were doing what else?
Didn't you do La Balance on the back? Because you went to we
did La Balance, yeah.
Stripped down to his underwear. He's like, I gotta do this, I can't do it. I'm too heavy. I'm too heavy. He just took all his clothes off in his underwear.
Yeah. And then right on the other side, you're looking at Carnage and stuff. The boulder behind you, it's to the left over that big undercling problem is like there's that V10 bulge, like compression-y thing.
Yeah, it's like the slightly overhung, almost vertical pinchy thing. It's like the pinches. God, what's that thing called?
Yeah, I'd have to look.
I remember going back the next year being like, I'm going to flash this thing this year.
Yeah. And then we really liked...
I still couldn't do it.
We really liked Isatis was really good. So like Dewsbury and Surprise and all those.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So is it just consistently that they were all climbing at a higher level, like technically? And I'm just curious, like, was it a technique thing? Was it a strength thing? Because it's hard for me to imagine that you guys were quote unquote weak at that point, and then, like, were they just more technical than you were? And that was the style that showcased that? But I know it's still burly. I mean, font like is still burly.
Yeah, I think they were, sorry, Jeremy, you can answer in a second, but I think they were stronger and their technique was better. Like some of the highlights of that trip, I might have done like, I don't know, I'll think about it, but I might have done like V7 or something.
Like Holy Moly and all that stuff.
Oh yeah, Holy Moly. Like things that were like big roofs that I thought were undergraded because there's not a lot of big roofs in front. So I was like, oh, is that really? It was still hard, but I remember some of, what's the butter dish one called? At Isatis. Anyway, there's like these slopers that are they're all like rails that are all sideways, and you have to smear your feet, but you're like grabbing these rails and like paddling. I think I just became a much better climber. My technique had to catch up at like V4 and under. There's probably like most people when they go to Valley, they're like, whoa, it sucked. But after that, you become a much better climber, even at a lower grade than your maximum. It was like that probably almost 2 trips I had to fly.
Yeah, that climb you're talking about, remember, we're sitting there and Ben Jerry and Malcolm Smith, all the Brits were climbing, and a couple other ones were climbing on that boulder, and we're climbing everything else and just kind of keeping an eye on because we like knew, we had watched The Real Thing and watching them, they're like 45 minutes and then they all do it. And we're like, we got all the beta. And it still took us like an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot. I mean, there's just so much to learn. I've been 9 times now, and
Wow.
not only have I not seen every area, there's that's a whole lifetime of climbing. It's like what we have here in the Sierras, except it's condensed in much smaller area. But you could spend a lifetime there and not climb.
Yeah.
I haven't done as much in Font as I would like. I only went one rainy week, but what blew me away was how the lower grade, I'll say like V4 and below, how they still had to be climbed in a certain way. Like it wasn't that if I was V10 strong, I could just kind of force it through and be like, yeah, I'm just going to grab this crimp and skip all the things. You still had to kind of walk your way through a V2, and it was easy. But yeah, it was like you had to follow the sequence, and it blew my mind how fun and intricate every grade was there. And I'd love to go back and try some of those.
One other thing, Josh, we didn't talk about it before, but like circuits were a new thing too. Like we came back from Font and we were like, we're going to create our own circuits at Castle. So we have our own like unnamed circuits, but still when I go there now, I was there a few weeks ago, and I still have like my, I don't know, probably 30 or 35 problem circuit that I do. That's still that we started from then. So yeah, just so people don't know, in Font, they use little paint. That's kind of frowned upon here, but they'll use little paint in numbers, and there's different color. So they use blue, orange, red,
black,
yellow, maybe white, black. Yeah. Black. And each one of those is typically a different grade or like a range of grades. And you can go do like a 60 or 80 problem, 30 to 60, 30 to 80 problem circuit. And oftentimes you can find some that don't ever touch the ground. So you're climbing something and you're walking across a boulder and you climb down something else and then you jump across some boulders and you climb some other stuff. And you just go for like an hour or plus hours. And sometimes you can do them in your approach shoes. Sometimes you do them in your best shoes and you walk in between because they have a really hard circuit that's like whatever, V8 above. It's a wonderful place. So even learning circuits and going and playing around, was great. Bringing some of that stuff back here was something that we had never known about.
I'm curious, did it really, I've had this experience, but I'm curious, like if it was looking back, it really happened. Like, did it really unlock new abilities? Like when you went to Bishop or Hueco the next time, like, did you all of a sudden have some different things in your toolkit? Like, was that like a defining thing where, or maybe did you approach problems differently? Like just what did you take back from that trip? Was it, physical, mental? How do you apply that to say Bishop or Yosemite?
I would say I have one thing that I think really specific, and I think Joel and I have both generally been pretty good at this, probably because we started Castle in the Valley and stuff, was just top outs, right? Top outs are difficult in Font, like oftentimes the crux. And doing that and then coming back to places like Bishop that even though the rock is completely different, some of the top outs are kind of similar, right? You're on these slopey things. You're often like side press mantling. Tahoe's the same. Yeah. So I think that helped at least help us excel a little bit more at top outs.
Yeah.
So take pride in them.
Yeah. There's points, Josh, that like there's certain types of climbs that I wouldn't have approached before. So I like doing first ascents. That's the majority of what I do. And exploring new areas and getting to those top outs. When I see blank round top outs, some people will be like, it doesn't go. And I'm like, no, that's just going to be a V9 top out. That's it. That's a stall. That might be the whole goal. It's right there. You just screw the stuff at the bottom and just jump to the top and do the hard part. Where I wouldn't have, I don't think had I not done harder stuff in the Valley and then gone to Font and see that almost everything is like some crazy pressing type thing, that I wouldn't look at the things now that way. I think we kind of talked about it before, is like trying all the crazy new hard knee bars, for example, trying them makes you start to see them when you go to other areas. And that would be a kind of a mind expanding thing from Font to here, is that Also keeping your whole core tight while you're moving. You said like very specific types of motions. You can't like relax and just grab a thing like in the middle of the happy boulders where your feet are like swinging all over. Like none of that, or very, very little of that is going to happen in font. So keeping like the whole system working while you're moving was also something that
the tension tight.
The Valley does that. The Valley does that close to that, but it's even still a little different. Even still a little different in font. Yeah.
It's actually one of the things that it's so weird how we paint these broad brushes and say something like font is really technical or something. You're like, okay, yeah, because you need to find this body position, but like the consistent tension and pressure that you have to exhibit is just so different from like when I think about or something in Bishop where you jump and snatch a crimp and like you just kind of like it's all about actually like being loose and swinging through it in the right way so that you can keep your down pull. And I don't know. I love hearing also that experiencing that style then literally changes your vision, right? Like literally when you're walking around, you're like, oh, that looks impossible. No, I saw actually that was a V3 in main font.
Yeah. You know, Josh, it's another tangent, but like when we talked about like what is the newer style now, and it's kind of a little, I don't want to say sad, but it's like a little disheartening when I'm hearing that a lot of folks aren't going outside that much and a lot of folks aren't traveling, like going on road trips, because of what you just explained. Like, what are the things you learn on those different styles that actually just make you so much of a better climber? But it's not just that. Like, it changes who you are, how you interact with other people, how you interact with this piece of stone. But like, you're ultimately learning something about yourself. That's one thing that I'm like, hey, there's some potential there. Like they're limiting their own being by not going out and seeing the world, not traveling and doing, whatever. The stone that we found out in, whatever, outside of Abu Dhabi is completely different. It's like climbing on these wadis, these washes are like climbing on like the sharpest reef stone. Like you just a little brush of your skin and you'd be like, it's like razor blades. It'll ruin a pair of shoes. But had I not been there, I wouldn't even think about how to like place my feet and like lift my body away from the wall and then move back in and away from the wall and move back in. Like it really expands your climbing style and like the movements that you're capable of even doing.
Yeah. It is interesting how gym culture is it's so strong. It's so easily accessible. I actually have this argument where I think bouldering became more popular because it's just easier to go and do it. But then when you take that to the next level, it's like, oh, I can just go to the gym. Like temps are always good. Buddies are always there. I got snacks at the counter. But it also makes me think of how in the gyms, especially because you literally have people setting the grades kind of are the grades more so than, if you go to font, then you go Hueco and you're like, this feels different because it really is different. And I think we've talked about this before where when I go to different areas, your guys' experience in like, you just sometimes get your ass kicked. I mean, you just go, oh, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. And I do enjoy, first of all, I just think that that's the best way to progress is to get your ass kicked and then be like, okay, I'm coming back for another helping. And I also has always given me this willingness to climb every climb and as a climb itself and know that regardless of the grade, sometimes I can excel on something that is theoretically really hard. And then you go font, you're like, wow, okay, V4. And taking that seriously is something that I think a lot of people, when they step outside the gym, they can have that ego get crushed. And it's kind of a make or break moment to really grow yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I like your encouragement to travel all over. And I mean, gyms have changed a lot. Joel, like, what do you like about gyms now versus before? And maybe what do you think is missing in the, we've had this evolution of angles and holds, but like, what have we lost and what have we gained?
Yeah. Gained, giant volumes, good setting. There's something I like to think of anyway, personally, is that I was taught by a group of people that taught me a certain number of lessons, and then I went and expanded it with my peers to another level. And what I think that the newer setters are showing me is something that I don't particularly like. That's because I'm not good at it. But when I think about my climbing as a whole, just because I don't like it, you mentioned it before, like you got to go get humbled. Just because I don't like it doesn't mean I shouldn't evolve. Like I love climbing so much that just because I don't like it doesn't mean I shouldn't learn. So a lot of World Cup-y type problems have snuck into all kinds of gym areas. And I don't always like it. Part of it is because I'm older. Part of it is because I don't bounce and roll and I break now rather than bruise. um, but that doesn't mean I shouldn't learn. So from that perspective, I have to like, swallow my own pride and now see things. I'm like, that's fucking not V7. I'm sorry. That's not V7. Or I say, that's not V7 like any other V7 I've climbed in every country I've ever climbed for the past nearly 3 decades. That's like nothing I've ever climbed. So in some perspectives, I'm like, where the fuck was your inspiration for this? Like, what are you trying to teach me? Because I got a pretty thick book of, techniques that I can draw from. And this is like nothing I've ever learned. And from that perspective, I'm like, thank you for teaching me something. But there's like this fine line of like, are you actually teaching me something that you know that I don't? Or is this some shit you're making up that now you're subjecting everyone to just this shit? So I'm like, I don't know yet. I don't know yet. So that's kind of like the detriment. I also don't see a lot of climbs that are like climbing outside. Where I'm like, when I do find the ones that are similar, I'm like, oh, that's a valley style climb. That's a buttermilk style climb. That like, I feel the grades are off by like 2 grades. I'm like, no, that's not what it's like climbing outside. You might think it's like climbing outside, but if you're not traveling a lot outside to really keep yourself tuned up to what it's like to climb outside, then that feels hard for you. But this style of weird World Cup-y thing, which I'm not traveling doing, seems hell hard for me. I'm like, what am I going to do? So anyway, that's kind of like the things, not quite climbing, like training or gym climbing to get ready to go outside versus gym climbing for the sake of gym climbing.
What about you?
Or
Jeremy?
going to the Olympics. Yeah, fucking good on everybody going to the Olympics.
Yeah. Right.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the stuff with, like you're saying, the World Cup style problems, I wonder if a lot of the driver of that too is just pure entertainment, right? Because when climbing's now into this visual medium where we can stream all the championships. Like you can watch them all the time, and it's particularly for someone who doesn't climb, it's much more exciting seeing people run around and jump and be like a ninja on the wall than being super delicate and holding on these tiny crimpers, and it looks like they're floating up the wall, even if it's really hard, right? For someone who's has never climbed, you watch someone that's just gracefully floating up the wall, you're like, okay, that's not very hard. What's so special about that?
That wasn't V12. Come on.
Yeah,
it was like V3.
I will say that I think so. I'm on board with both of what you guys are saying. I will say that one of the issues I think with some of this new style setting is when it comes from setters who haven't traveled a lot, and then they see something and they try to set something compy style. And my argument for it would be that when you take people who have traveled all over the world, have been setting for 15 years, and then you give them these volumes and they do things that are a little more modern, it's actually really interesting and cool. It often goes wrong when you have someone who's never really done anything and then they are like, look at these big volumes, like look at you run and jump, and it's like you're missing like what's the thread there. Because this is a thing that I often argue, even though I'm not a big compy style guy. I also now break instead of bruise. I like that. My favorite example is that Industry of Cool, where it's a double dyno in Rocklands. And so the reason why, and I argue that wouldn't have been unlocked had some of the setting not let people change that vision. But there's clearly a through line there. There's a thread in that setting that even connects to these fundamentals that we're used to, that's being stretched and seen what's capable, versus kind of just here's some big giant volumes and I saw, it looks cool putting these many triangles in a row. Like, good luck. Like that's very different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep.
But I do think that visual component's a big part, Jeremy. I think that's actually one of the things that isn't talked about as much. But I was talking to Jamie Emerson. I don't know if you guys know him, but he's an experienced setter. And the thing and a great climber, thing he always said to me that kind of just stuck in my head since I heard it is he's like, I can set something that showcases the power of some of these guys like Daniel Woods or Chris Sharma. And I would actually maybe watching like the super technical, delicate, like thin things. Isn't that fun? But I'd kind of argue that's what World Cups look like now. And I like seeing like the really burly style. And I remember seeing you guys in the gym, and you guys were on these prows, on these slopers. And I know we can link that to something like font, but actually it was like a very different visual style of slapping and compression. And I think that actually looks cooler than what's going on now. Yeah.
I think we both have always liked the slappy compression stuff, right?
Squeezing hard stuff. Yeah.
Yep. And it's always like, that's something with like climbing with Joel is always like, I feel that he changed or progressed my style because he's taller than me, got more ape index. So I was always stretching and trying to climb really extra tall, mostly to keep up with Joel. Right. But it's a burly, like hard compression, big moves, stretched out, keep your feet on. Just,
there's
just tangent.
It's interesting that you say that though, Jeremy, because I enjoy being very, very wide and stretched out, feet way out, and, down towards the ground, wherever, low, and arms way out. But you're, I don't know, whatever, 4 inches shorter than me or something.
Yep.
And I've always been impressed that there's one other person, also Joel Gilmore, but people that are like considerably shorter than myself, but never, I don't know, Jeremy, if I've ever heard you say like, oh, it's because I'm short, or I can't reach that, or fuck you because you're tall, or like there's things that I haven't really heard from Jeremy, and I can reach way farther than he can, but he'll figure out a way. That's pretty interesting to see that we're climbing very similarly.
Did people complain a lot about height, or was that kind of never even talked? And also, just for reference, like Jeremy, you're not short, and you're more of like average, like and it's funny that I in the kind of little form I had you guys fill out, I asked your guys' stats, and in my memory, I actually didn't think of you guys as being that different of a size, it was interesting actually seeing that in the hard numbers. Like, but I'm just curious, is that I personally hate hearing people complain about reachy or whatever, even if they're right, somehow it's wrong. Like you're wrong anyways. And I was wondering if that's kind of a newer thing, or if that, you would hear, I don't know, Lynn Hill being like,
Yes, we have a story about that one, right? Remember that? There was this kid, Mike Dominguez, maybe? It doesn't matter. Kid from the gym, long time ago. So Lynn Hill was coming to the original Planet Granite to do, a slideshow, right? We had all kinds of people like Warren Harding in there, different people. And she was very adamant about nothing's too reachy. You just got to find a different way to climb it. And then she got on some gym climb that this guy Mike had done, and he was huge and had this huge ape index, and it was just this horizontal move as far as you could reach. And she just funnily said, "Oh, except that one." And then just like the conversation changed. It was something along those lines.
Yeah, well, it's a big difference. Indoors versus outdoors is quite different, where there can theoretically be some moves that are just physically actually impossible. But you watch Lynn Barraza out in Yosemite and you go, oh, I didn't know there was a hold there. Did you just invent that hold? Because
did you just pull on that piece of lichen?
Yeah, what is that?
She's like, oh, I flipped the undercling on that foot chip that you were. Yeah. Oh, incredible.
I mentioned real quick Joel Gilmore. So he and I climbed a number of seasons together, and for people who don't know, I think he's probably 5'4", and
big ape though, big ape.
Yeah, big ape, and just a beast. Or at least he was a beast of a climber. And he and I would climb a number of the same things, and I would just be like flying through holds or dynoing past holds or whatever. And his ability, this is something I think because Greg would climb with us at the same era. Greg would also have to jump in between things. And I remember he and Greg talking about, so Greg's 5'8" or something, I'm 6 foot, and Joel Gilmore 5'4". So it's like a big span of those of us who are climbing together. And I remember Greg and Joel Gilmore in Squamish one year talking about how to dyno into and out of underclings. And I was like, okay, this is new. Tell me about this. So some of us will like grab an undercling, right? And you're like, okay, now I got to stand up into it. And they're like, I can touch it with my fingers, and you got to take whatever other hold. And they're like, what? And they're jumping into it and smacking their feet onto the wall and like smearing. And I was like, oh shit, mind blowing. Like, I'm going to do that now. Thank you very much. It's not going to be helpful for you guys, but it was like a whole different set of moves. Anyway, my point in all this is saying, I don't think I've ever heard Jeremy Gregg or even Joel Gilmore complain about their height. I've heard Joel say, damn, that move's far away. But he would still climb V12 or V13. And I'm just like, I'm sorry, everyone. I'm sorry, everyone who's like, too short. I'm like, tell that guy that you're 2.5 inches taller than that you're 5'6" is too short. Like, that fucking dude just crushed it. So I'm not saying that there's not problems that are just completely morpho. There's no legitimate way that somebody can reach it. But there's problems like that for me too. There's guys, Noah Kaufman, he's probably got 6 inches of reach on me. It doesn't look that big. But you take some of those, people that are in the mid, 6'3" to 6'5" or something, and they've got an 8th index of nearly 7 feet. Like, there's going to be just shit I can't reach also. So it's more like, now I have to go find a new way to
climb it different.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think the gym exasperates the problem in some ways, right? There's always, you have really tall setters, they set a certain style, and then people that are shorter really don't like them. And there's a constant complaints at the gym. And that's one thing I don't think that's changed with route setting over the 30 years, right? There's always a shortage of route setters. Gyms getting more and more popular. And where was I going with that? They don't get positive feedback. Like, setters do not get positive feedback. They get negative feedback all the time. And you have gym owners and stuff that aren't necessarily sympathetic to that. They hear negative comments and they think it's bad, right? Where it's like, it's a pretty thankless job in a lot of ways. And it's difficult, and there's not enough of them. It's hard to get good at it.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's so many things to say about it.
Definitely hasn't changed in 30 years. That's a whole other rabbit hole. Yeah.
Sorry, one last thing on setting, reachy versus non-reach, short versus tall. Somebody might get triggered that I use that. I apologize. One thing that I've kind of changed my perspective on in the gym climb. So a lot of the setters that are at the gyms that I climb at tend to be shorter than I am. And when I was setting, Jeremy and I used to set, and we used to coach kids too. So like, trying to think about how different people climb within their box is something that we've always been conscious of. And when we were setting, it was like, oh, you got to make sure that somebody could reach to some certain point, on their body, and okay, how powerful are you moving and whatnot. And it wasn't until recently that I'm like, I don't like this World Cup-y stuff. God. And then I looked at all the setters, one day or over the course of a couple of days, and I was like, damn, everybody's like, they're like 5'8" or under. And I was like, So even though I don't like it, I've told myself that I need to actually change my perspective somewhat, not all the time, somewhat, and say that I can actually get shorter, but they can't get taller. So like, physically, can I actually grab the holds or touch the holds? I can, because I'm taller. Where they may not be able to actually touch the holds with their feet on in the same way that I can. Now, they may have to learn new techniques and like explosive jumping and stuff like that, some other new technique. But I can't complain now, because everyone who's setting is 5'8" and under. Like, I got to learn some new shit. So this is kind of like that thing going back to earlier, like, it's my turn to evolve also, in that I need to learn some new techniques too.
I want to connect this to what you were saying, where you heard from Greg about doing something dynamic into an undercling, and that whole idea of like, you couldn't necessarily stack, you're touching it with your tips, and then it's actually kind of like that mantle we were talking about with Midnight Lightning. Like, what if you kind of dynamically moved into it, right? And I'm just kind of curious about, I want to link this again to Chris Sharma in that era, because that's something that really stood out to me, was this dynamic movement of Chris. And I always remember when this was still a little bit later, but he put up I think it's called like 3 degrees of separation in Seiyus, and it has these big dynos. So it's 3 dynos. It's near realization or biography or whatever. And those big dynamic moves, like, were dynos and dynamic moves, like, when did those start kind of entering the vocabulary for you guys? And you can even connect that to setting, like, when Steve came back from Hueco, was it ever like, oh, hey, like jump to this, like catch it with one hand and swing? Like when did that start kind of being part of the style?
Yeah, I totally remember this stuff. And it was like, we were setting, and it tended to be a number, like a small crew that was like, hey, let's dyno, let's dyno. There was also a shift in the thinking around that early 2000s in a lot of the competitions. So there was like I don't know if they did it in Hueco, but definitely at the Phoenix Bouldering Contest, what they were doing was after they had like this artificial wall, and they had a dyno contest. So I remember here in the Bay, it would just be like, oh, a couple of setters. We would always set them in the gym because it was just fun to do. We also thought it was a skill in there early on. It was like, you don't dyno unless you have to dyno. Everything you should be doing is a dead point. Dead point is property. And that was like from the kind of the sport climbing world coming into bouldering. And then we were like, yeah, but I can go like 2 feet further than that if I just let my feet come off. So we were like, thank you for the guidance, and that gets me to topping out. So I'm going down this route. I'm going to start dynoing. So we would set them up ourselves on our own walls. Like we would tend to put them up in the rope area. So we'd go out there and tape off dynos out in like the sport climbing walls, because there was like so much more wall that you could dyno sideways and jump to.
Yep.
And
or double stack and
double stack, double clutch, or double clutch. Yeah, put your foot on it and jump again. It was like all these things we were experimenting with. But then you actually, when it started to become a thing, was when you could win money for it. I remember one of the first Phoenix Bouldering contests. I don't know if it was $100. I think it was $100. And they had the holds, starting holds on the wall, and then there was multiple holds that were up on the wall. And depending on where you would dyno, you either made it to the next round, and at the end there was, I think that somebody take $100 up there, or $50 or something. But that's when people were like, "Whoa, let's really see how you can do this and how far you can go with it."
Yeah, and I mean, a dyno is just a big dead point, right?
Well, but still, there is that shift of like, I mean, dead pointing was a shift, and then letting your feet come off is a shift. And I can't believe you said Phoenix Bouldering Contest. I went to that probably in like 95 or something, which is a trip. And I remember the dyno comp. And what's hilarious too is I remember the Phoenix Bowl. So this was an outdoor competition. There were still ropes on some of the boulders. Like you even though it was boulder, you would like climb on ropes or without a rope. And I think Chris won that year too. I remember going and being like, wow, 16-year-old one. And I was like 11 years old. And I was like, maybe I can win it at 16.
There was a few projects up there too. And I think he had done a couple of the projects during the contest. Yeah.
Oh man, you guys freaking amazing. There's a lot more. I'm sure there's many more stories in these 30 years. And I think it's really important for us to share this stuff, and it gets lost so quickly. And you guys gave me all these tips along the way. And when I was younger, guys like Vic really, like I will always love Vic because he took me under his wing. I was just an annoying 11-year-old, and he was just a probably slightly less annoying 16-year-old. But this kind of passing of the torch, this mentorship, it's been lost a little bit, and at least we got a chance to like share some things, some etiquette, some ways of spotting, some showcasing of why things are the way they are. So just loved it, you guys. There's so many more knowledge bits that I'd love to transfer on, but only have so much time and so much energy. But thank you. Actually, on that note, Jeremy, can you distill your 30 years of more wisdom down to one quick pro tip that solves all of our problems?
Man, I mean, I would say it comes with, it's that whole try hard thing, but it's you gotta be respectful too. Always be spotting, always be brushing, and just climb, right?
Yeah.
Go out, climb a lot, get as much exposure as you can, as much rock, as much experience with other people, and and spread the love around.
Yeah. Well, I gotta tell you, I like hearing you say that, because sometimes I do feel like a lot of people have been climbing for a long time. There's almost this reaction against the growth of climbing. And again, it's kind of like, well, we were beginners at some time too. And there's been some, it does suck. I will say, I remember going out to the sad boulders. I go to the Beefy Gecko cave, whatever that sad cave, ice caves.
Yep,
and I walk in there, someone's, smoking, they got their dog in there, and there's 8 people, and there's a boombox. And I'm just like, fuck, dude. Yeah, that's actually one of my big pet peeves is play music if you're by yourself. don't play music when I'm there, or at least ask me. So, I just like that there's still that positive, like get out, do it. It's a wonderful sport, and share it, but be respectful. Listen to the tips. Yeah. What about you, Joel? What's your 30 years of wisdom in one sentence?
I have one sentence.
It could be two sentences. Two. Yeah.
Get uncomfortable, or maybe get comfortable with being uncomfortable, and fucking find some try hard. Like, it's in there, and it tends to be in those uncomfortable places, and the willingness to go into those uncomfortable places is where you'll be a completely different person when you exit. Find something meaningful. That'd be the other sentence, I guess. Like, don't fucking waste your time on all that shit.
It's really meaningful to find that try hard and uncomfortable. Like, I think that's where, we just are climbing rocks, but clearly there's some moments of transcendence, because otherwise you wouldn't do it for 30 years. Although, yeah, Jeremy, in West Coast Pimp, you were like, if I do this boulder problem, I don't need to climb anything else ever.
ever again.
Forever. I didn't say I wouldn't have to climb. I said I'd be totally happy with climbing forever.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm still happy with climbing.
Yeah.
So maybe it came true. We'll see.
Yeah.
Another 5 decades will tell. Wait.
I like that.
Okay, 4 decades.
Who knows? Technology. I told you I was just talking to Matty Hong, and we were talking about his dad, Steve Hong, who he's still climbing, or maybe he has a few injuries. And I think Matty says he's like, oh, he's still climbing like V5, 13A or something. I think he's like 69.
Yep.
You go,
awesome.
Okay, good to know. I've always had my eye on Yuji Hirayama. He was like he was the guy when I was a kid.
Yep.
I was like, Yuji. And I finally, dude, one time I finally met him in Spain, and he like used my quick draws on something. I was like, you have no idea. Like, I was just like, Yuji.
Jin Woo-ju from the climbing gym, we call him Gino, he had Yuji Hirayama, and we took him out to Castle. Years and years ago.
Yeah.
And you talk about being humbled, right? He got spanked the first day. Wow. And I remember there was a big log, and we call this thing the elephant butt mantle. And he got spanked on it, couldn't mantle it. So he just runs off this log and pommel horses on top and stands. He turns around, he's like, guys, I did it. And then literally the next day he went, and there's a climb to Bates that has a pretty hard start. And I remember he pulled off the ground, and he goes, Jeremy, do I go to this hold or this hold? While he's pulling off the ground, holding with one arm. I'm like, the second one. And then he just crushed everything. Anyway, that was my one time meeting Yuji.
Legend. You guys are legends too. And thank you for coming on and sharing, the history, and thanks for all you did for my climbing, for Tim's, and for the countless other people that you met along the way. And I'm glad you also got to kind of say some things about the Greg Lowe and the people who came before you, and kind of like, let's keep that ball rolling. Everyone, if you know something, help those around you, because that's what we do. And I appreciate your guys' time. I appreciate all the help you gave me along the way.
Thanks for having us on. And thanks for the kind words.
Yeah, thanks, Josh, for sure. 100%. Appreciate everything.
Thank you, guys. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. Go get some.
You too. We're still getting it. Thanks for tuning in. If you'd like to learn more about Testpiece climbing, you can check us out at testpiececlimbing.com and even book a session with one of our coaches.